Everyone at some point has likely heard the tired old claim that humans and chimps' DNA are only 1 to 2% different from each other, and they share 98% of their genetic makeup. And this argument's been made, of course, to prove the supposed evolutionary relationship between humans and apes. It's made frequently, but far from being factual, it's simply not true. And informed and honest evolutionists have agreed it's false. For example, in a rather revealing article whose title itself shows that the gig is up as far as the only 1 to 2% difference argument goes, called Relative Differences, the Myth of 1%, the evolution-believing author wrote this: genome-wise, referring to the DNA inside the nucleus of the cell, humans and chimpanzees are quite similar, but studies are showing that they are not as similar as many tend to believe. Now, many lay people often have the simplistic view that somehow scientists can simply line up all the individual chemical DNA letters from both chimp and human genomes kind of beside one another, and voila, 98% of the letters are in exactly the same place, side by side. Kind of like looking at a copy of a book and comparing it to a revised edition of it and finding out there was only 2% difference in content. But this is simply not the case. The 98 to 99% refers only to substitutions in aligned regions where human and chimp DNA have different bases or letters. However, this isn't taking into account the many other differences there are in their DNA as well. For example, there are gaps in the aligned region where there's, the human DNA, but no matching chimp DNA or vice versa. And there's also millions of bases outside the aligned regions that don't match whatsoever, but that aren't counted at all in the DNA similarity argument's conclusion. However, if all of the differences were counted and combined, it shows a total of 600 million differences between human and chimp DNA and drops the similarity down to only 80%. Now, some people think, but it's still 80% alike, inferring that any great amount of similarity within creatures lends weight to the evolutionary story by somehow demonstrating a close ancestral relationship between them. However, evolutionist Steve Jones addressed that misconception once while speaking to an audience in the context of the supposed 98% similarity between men and chimp DNA, stating this: "We also share about 50% of our DNA with bananas, and that doesn't make us half bananas, either from the waist up or the waist down." The fact is, all living things share similar organic building blocks and a similar genetic code or language that contains the instruction for the construction and maintenance of it, the same as our written English language, for example. So similar to if you picked up, let's say, 2 detective novels from your local library and were able to somehow compare their text using a computer algorithm, the diagnostic would likely find many similar isolated words and phrases. And that's because, just like the genome of any creature, both books follow the same rules of grammar and contain literary conventions that a detective novel would typically use. But the similarity doesn't mean that one of those books evolved from the other. So, do humans and chimps have 98% DNA similarity? No. The Bible clearly teaches there are no missing links between apes and humans. The fact is, the 98% similarity between humans and chimps argument is a myth, but one that continues to be promoted and propagated by evolutionists to this day, long after the truth was readily available to them in the scientific literature. The truth is, chimps are animals and people are not. Humans are created in the image of God, distinct from the animals as Genesis describes.